Casino employees of Reddit, what is the worst you have ever seen someone handle a loss? I was security at a casino for a few years. Saddest story for me was this older gentleman, let's call him Tom for privacy's sake. Tom would frequent the casino every day, spending anywhere from $200 to $300. I had struck up lots of conversations with him because he was a regular and he was genuinely kind person who I enjoyed seeing. One day Tom comes in and I can tell he is upset. I don't make anything of it, but after seeing the guy for a few years almost every day, that day he looked really off. So a couple hours go by and I track him down and ask, how's the day going? Any big wins? Just general chit chat. He starts sobbing, tears running down his face. His wife had passed away from sudden cardiac death, is what I believe he called it, the night before, and he was devastated. We talked for quite a while. I tried comforting him while he played the machines. I had noticed he was betting extremely large, $200 to $300 per spin on the slot machine. I knew that was a lot for him, but I didn't saying anything because it's not my business, and I was sure it's a coping mechanism for him at the moment, doing something he loved when he just lost the love of his life. Hours later I see him heading out the door. I run up to him, catch him and wish him all the best and that I'll see him soon. He smiled, said thanks for the chat and thank you for the condolences, and left. He booked a room in our hotel and killed himself that night. A little while later I find out through some other staff who were sort of friends of his family that he had spent all of his money, every dime that evening, spinning high limit on the machines. I'm assuming because he wanted a little enjoyment before he took his life. Still makes me upset I didn't invite him or over or do anything else because I knew he was in pain. Former table dealer here. I've had drunk guys tell me I'm the worst dealer ever, I suck, etc. I would just reply have a nice day. The other people at the table were generally on my side. I've higher roller slammed the table with their fist or not react at all to losing thousands. The worst and the saddest one that sticks in my mind is a guy who was around $2,000 down on blackjack. He was nice. He was tipping pretty well. I was rooting for him, as a right tended to do. I knocked his tens for good luck. Then he lost a big one and just yelled "fuck" so loud that the entire casino must have heard it. It was the kind of desperation in his voice and everything about him that told me he could not afford to lose as much as he just lost. He went to the ATM and I rotated to another table. It was shit like that. The goddamn smoke in my face, sleep deprivation from the late nights that led me to get out of there. A lot of other unpleasant moments too, but they all blur together. Money was nice, but it wasn't for me. I sat next to a guy. He drove a Pepsi truck. He said his mom died and left him $30,000. He'd never seen this much money before, so he thought he could turn it into $100,000. We are at the blackjack table. He's getting wasted and crying inconsistently because of his mom, talking about her dying. The cocktail waitresses are cock-teasing him the whole night, and he tips them $25s every drink. In 2 hours he loses everything. He has this look of nervousness on his face and said his wife is going to kill him if she finds out about this because they have 4 kids and wanted to buy a house. He walked out. 10 minutes later I go to my car and see that he got a DUI. In 24 hours. His mom died. He gets a ton of money, loses it all, will probably get divorced, gets a DUI, and is sitting in the back of a cop car with blue balls from the cocktail waitresses. Edit. I don't know if his mom died the same day he got the money. I didn't ask him about that. This was like 15 years ago. Obligatory not a casino employee, but when I was in Vegas, I was watching a very intense game of blackjack on Fremont Street. The guy bet everything he had, convinced, since he was on a winning streak, this would be the hand that doubled his winnings. Unshockingly, he busts. As soon as they swooped his chips away, he began slamming his hands on the table screaming what the fuck? What the fuck? With his girlfriend, dressed in a cheesy tight mini dress and 7-inch heels, screaming at him and telling him that he promised her a Birkin purse with that money and crying. An unsuspecting guy accidentally bumped into this irate dude, and that just made him lose his shit. A chair went flying. The guy he bumped into stepped up and starts asking him if he wants a piece of this. Shoves are exchanged, and the screaming starts, just as a high heel is thrown straight past the sore loser's face and right into someone else's head. I wanted to stay and watch the throwdown, but my boyfriend yanked me away with a solid nope. Just as well, two furious looking Vegas PD officers were literally shoving their way through the crowd as we stepped away. Not an employee, but the first time I was ever in a casino I was skulking around the blackjack tables. I was baffled by the minimums $500, $1,000, $5,000 a hand. Edit. Someone has pointed out that I may have been looking at the maximums. It's hard to remember, and my memory is probably skewed as it was my first time in a casino. Everything was baffling at the time, haha. I thought it was nuts. But this was a busy day and all of them were full point. I sat behind the $5,000 minimum table and watched a guy lose hand after hand after hand. I always figured that when someone bets at these tables they have so much money that they can afford to throw it away like it was nothing. Not this guy. I don't know if this guy's just wanted to be a high roller for the day or what, but he was visually upset and very quickly bleeding into audibly upset. He lost his last hand. He faking lost it. He yelled, "Where is that fugly beach? I want a Manhattan." Then proceeded to rant and rave until the pit boss came over and offered him something or other. He continued to be a giant ass, and so 3 security guards came over and escorted him to the buffet. I like to imagine he tried to get his tens of thousands of dollars back in crab legs. Ex-casino worker here. I have a couple of stories. We spent 1 hour and 20 minutes on the table before a break point. A guy went to the ATM about 3 to 4 times and came back with roughly $200 each time. Each time he got more and more nervous. The last time he came to the table he said, "This is the last of my cash, hey, this is my rent money." He got down to his last $50 and he turned that into like $800. He was the only one at the table, and I said, "I shouldn't say this, but you should go home. You have done well, and you should cash that in and head home." He said, "Thanks, I really appreciate it," and left. He came back 10 minutes later and lost it all. He finished off with him taking off his shoes and putting them on the table and said, "You've taken everything, you may as well take my shoes." 2.2. I was dealing, and this guy came up to my table and cashed in $1,000 bucks each time. He cashed in a total of $4,000. He could be the most aggressive guy I had ever met. He flashed his black card and proceeded to tell me how important he was. He got really aggressive by the $2,000 to $3,000 mark and started berating me each time he lost. After a while I said, "I don't care who you are, you have to treat me with some form of respect." He was putting so much money over, the pit bosses did nothing, and he settled a bit after I said that. When I left the table a young woman replaced me, and I heard that he started to do the same thing that he did to me, and she froze mid-hand. She couldn't move as he was yelling at her so much and she freaked. The pit boss came up to try and defuse the situation, and he hit him. I heard he got a 5-year ban. Friend used to work at a casino in Las Vegas. He said one day, a woman came in and gambled away about $30,000, which was her family's life savings, all their money, and also her son's college fund. Few hours later, my friend goes on his break and stumbles on the lady and her son, around 17 to 18, in the parking lot, and the kid is absolutely livid. He's screaming at her, calling her every name in the book, yelling that she ruined his life and he now can't go to college because of her. She's now dead to him, etc. During all this, his mother is bawling like a baby and pleading with him to stop yelling at her and saying that she's sorry. My friend had to call security when the kid started to assault her, punching her, slapping her, pulling her hair, etc. When they arrived, though, they saw him drive out of the parking lot and nearly, possibly deliberately, run over his mother as she, blood just gushing out of her nose, was lying on the ground and shrieking for him to stop. Very disheartening, my friend said. I was playing poker at a casino years ago. Was playing $5/10 no limit hold'em. Over the course of about 2 hours, I took 3 huge pots off the same guy. Each time it was a case of me outbetting him. He folds, and I muck the winning hand. That means I opted to not show my cards, because when the other players fold, you are not obligated to do so. On the third big pot I took from him, I showed him my cards for fun, and I turned over a garbage hand. He claimed he folded a straight. He got extremely mad and jumped to his feet and started walking around screaming at the top of his lungs. The next time I have a good hand, you better call my raise, and you better faking pump it. Security came over and calmed him down. He agreed to chill out. What happened next was caused by me deliberately. I wanted to poke the bear and see this guy really lose his cool. He calls one of my bets, and the hand involved just the two of us and one other guy. On the river card, the angry guy folds his hand after me and the other guy bet and raised 2 or 3 times. The other guy folds his hand and I show another sheety hand to the table. I think it was a missed flush draw. The angry gentleman jumped over the table and tried to hit me. Security was still close by and dragged him out of the poker room. He threw a few punches and we saw them through the doorway. They had him pinned down to the floor with their knees in his neck for 20 minutes waiting for the police. He was fuming for the first few minutes, and after that he was trying to apologize and begging them not to get the police involved. Not a casino employee, but worked at a kiosk for a very brief time when I was younger. Back then, we had some slot machines, illegal now, to some extent. Current slot machines have tiny spin/bets, like a few cents per spin, and I'd say that on any given day, we'd have around 4 to 5 regulars that would just hang around all day long and throw away their money on the machines. These people were 100% addicts. Maximum bets on such machines were like $5 a spin, which adds up when you're hanging around the machine 6 to 7 hours a day. After some of them had gambled away say $1K, they'd start to do weird shit like writing false out of service signs and hang/tape on the machine while they sprinted/drove home or to the bank to get more money. Their rationale was that if they had fed the machines that much, it would spit it out again very soon, and they obviously didn't want any others to win their lost money. One day, let's call her Jane, was playing the machines. She came in with a stack of cash, probably $5K or $10K, as it looked fresh, and played away 90% of it. Then tried another machine and lost it all. She started screaming, kicking the machines. Completely lost it. Turns out she'd been stealing money from her employer and was taking out more and more, hoping to it all back. I'm not sure why they don't understand it. Slot machines are a guaranteed loss over time. It's only beneficial if/when you put on some money and by chance win right time. If you keep putting your money on the machines, you'll lose. I've had a few patrons lose a ton and never come back, only to find out later they drove their car into a tree or put a shotgun in their mouth. I do have a good story about the worst I saw someone handle a win. This older gentleman was a regular and a total ass. Never tipped, never smiled or said hello, and was always in a foul mood. I was watching him play a 50-cent machine one night when he hit 3 jackpot symbols and won $5 grand. I went up to him and congratulated him, and I'll never forget the bemused look on his face. When the machine hits a single payout of over $1,200, the machine locks up and won't spin again until an attendant resets it. He just kept hitting the button in vain, trying to keep playing like a child whose toy stopped working. When I told him that the machine was not going to spin until we paid him his hand pay, his only words were, "Can I play this one?" and motioned to the machine next to his. I told him that he could, and he moved over and went straight back into his zombie trance. When we brought his jackpot winnings to him, he huffed and puffed because we asked him to stop playing for a minute while we counted out his $5,000. It's like the money didn't even matter. Working at a casino can be a lot of fun, but the worst thing about it is the fact that you know you're a drug dealer and your whole job is to make sure people keep taking your product. I've seen a lot of bad behavior at tables. One guy flipped a table after a particularly bad night. One regular would tear cards in half every so often, but only on the last hand of a shoe. A fellow dealer was spit on multiple times in 2 separate incidents. First of 2 that happened to me personally. A regular in our high limit pit was playing 2 spots at a private blackjack table, betting between 2K 5K per spot. In less than an hour he was more than 60k down, and it wasn't the first time he'd lost that much in one visit. He asked my floor supervisor to ban him from the casino so he couldn't play anymore, but by the time the pit boss had the paperwork ready, he refused to sign it. That was the last time I dealt to him, but he continued to play at our casino throughout my time there. Second was a friend of mine. I was at an empty blackjack table on a Saturday night, empty because every shoe was super cold. My friend walks up and wants to play. I tell him how bad the cards have been running. He doesn't care. I tell him I can't deal to him because it's against the casino rules, and tell my floor I've known the guy since I was 6. Floor okays it anyway. 16 hands in a row he lost a $25 bet, then bet his last $100 on the 17th and lost again. To this day, more than a decade later, he holds it against me and somehow believes I had something to do with it. Probably too late, but I've got a lot of good ones. I would like to mention that not everything at a casino is negative or depressing. A lot of poker players play for entertainment just like golf. They make great friends, connections, and it's a social thing. Also it's a great way for paraplegics and the like to get their competitive edge out. Not a loss but a win. Old man at the poker table. He barely knows how to play and usually losses $100-200. One day he's winning big. Has a heart attack after winning a monster pot for his stakes. Around 1k. He falls on the dealer and ambulance comes. He's lucky a cheetah doctor was playing and instantly recognizes his symptoms. He lived and still comes into play, but never got the chance to actually rack up and leave a winner. To this day that's the only time I've seen him leave a winner. Guy tries to kill himself in bathroom. I'm guessing it was a cry for help, because he threw the knife over his bathroom stall and it hit an employee. He lived but never seen him since. X whale. Used to be a millionaire. He continuously ignores his cell phone and then somebody will call the casino and ask for him as if it's an emergency. He goes by a different name now so that when they call and ask for him, he can stay silent without the awkwardness. Turns out the person calling a million times asking for him is his 8-year-old son. Watched a 30-ish-year-old grown man, no gang member that always acts hard, loses a big bet, then cried at the table and asked for his money back. Just mumbled "That's faked up" over and over. That's faked up. It was awkward as hell. I could go on forever. I'm always late. Worked at a casino for 7 years. Seen a whole bunch of stuff. Fighting, verbal altercations, drunken slosh festivities. But the worst for me personally was this one guy who made me hate my job. Many reasons to love and hate it, but this one guy made me feel hopeless. He's come to sit at my baccarat table. He's dressed plain clothes, but they looked quite worn, clean but worn, and his glasses have tape holding the bridge and are a little wonky. Jeans are worn at the bottom and his shoes are pretty lived in. Now this baccarat table is on the main floor with a high minimum of $25 a bet. So pretty high bet for average Joe Blow per hand. He pays up $100. I hand over the chips and we play. For about 10 hands he's doing well. He's got $500 now and looking happy. And then it begins. He loses a $50 bet. And another, then another, and so on until he's down to his last $25. He wasn't getting too annoyed, just increasingly sad and almost desperate. This kind of gambling is what kills me the most inside, and as a closet gambler I know what the other side is like. I had a problem too. My heart just broke as I watched him put all his hope on his last $25 and saw his face fall in defeat the moment I flipped the house's card showing a natural 9. He'd lost his last $25 from elation to desperate on to defeat, all in the space of 30 minutes. He just sat there for a few moments checking his wallet. He seemed to be lost. He just looked so sad with himself. And that just wrecked me inside. While I understand that I didn't do anything wrong, it's just knowing you're an unwilling accomplice to someone's downfall changes the way you feel about doing the job. Sometimes I did fervently express my opinion of this man and what happened to my immediate supervisor, RSG training and all that. At first she thought I was having a laugh and dismissed it. But when I saw him leave and come back to the table next to me with a $50 note this time, I flagged my supervisor again. But she still disagreed with me. It was a big frustration working in my industry, teaching us about RSG, and then turning a blind eye most of the time, made me so mad. I was a speck, a nobody, just a number. No matter how many times I tried my best to look out for things and make my bosses aware, I was made to feel what was the point of the training in the first place. The people running the place don't care. They need the greedy and desperate to oil the cogs. I sure don't mind taking from the greedy, but not the desperate. Feels wrong point. But it's not all gloom and doom. Many fun lovely people and fun good times had there. Just only a few minor bad eggs, and that includes both patrons and staff. Many stories here, as I'm sure many others have. Not a story about losing, but more a post about my parents as gambling addicts. Both my parents are Asian, and they have been gambling addicts for as long as I've been alive. The nights that my parents would leave the house after midnight, leaving me by myself, still haunts me. I would wake up in the middle of the night, or in the morning, and the house would be empty. They would go 4 to 6 times a night. My family life was always really tense, because we didn't have that much money to begin with. But their addiction got worse after my parents won a jackpot of $27,000 and paid off the house. They wanted more. My mom felt like she was more responsible because she would blow a bunch of money, 1000s at a time, and then win double it back sometimes. My dad wouldn't get as lucky because he always sucked at the table games. He would just use it on slot machines and then lose 1000s of dollars, ending up with a bunch of debt several times. My parents divorced because of this issue and finger pointing. There are so many nights where my parents or one of them would come home with their head hung low. Then they would just be so upset that they wouldn't really speak to me or each other, and they would lie about how much they really spent. Sometimes I would catch them sobbing and feeling so guilty. I felt sad for them. When I turned 19, my parents both took me to a casino to celebrate my birthday with a dinner there. They were still gambling addicts at this point. I proceeded to just walk around endlessly, feeling really uneasy by the sight of people mindlessly pressing a button with blank tired faces. I felt bored because I had zero desire to play after I lost $20. I sat by my mom at a slot machine. She was putting in 100s at a time and losing it in less than 10 minutes. After about losing $500, she turned to me and said in a irritated tone, "Can you leave? You're bringing me bad luck." It made me feel sad. 2 years as a cashier. Luckily I didn't see any suicides, but we had multiple people pass and or cheat themselves at the slot machines, either in protest over bad luck or because they were absolutely convinced the machine was about to pay out and didn't want to miss their chance. We had a couple bans for people cussing out employees, a couple more for cheating at the tables. Surveillance gods, do not attempt to put one over on them. The usual shenanigans that happen when you mix the chance to lose money with free alcohol. Also, sheet and piss all over the bathroom walls, ceiling, door handle, sink knobs, soap dispenser, literally every reachable surface in the damn bathroom, coated in human waste. Big prize still goes to the employee who got busted cooking meth in the bathroom of one of the hotel rooms. That was a fun shift when the cops showed up to take care of that situation. I work for a company with an casino app for phones and computers. You can't win money, and you don't have to spend money to play, but you can spend money to buy more chips. We regularly receive death threats, suicide threats, if we don't give them more free stuff, threats of violence, curse-laden prayers for our painful demises, assurances that we deserve to die in fires, and promises that the FBI/the Attorney General/Donald Trump will be investigating our obviously corruptors any day now. That's on top of people condescending to us, telling us we are worthless or without morals, that they essentially pay us our wages and get to treat us however they want. There are shining gems of people, for sure. It's not uncommon to befriend several high rollers and establish a rapport with them. But there is also a cesspool of individuals we regularly joke about how well issuing threats would go over in person in an actual casino. I'm a current table games dealer. I'm a 3-game dealer, meaning I deal blackjack, roulette and the crown jewel. Craps, I have a bit of a twist on my answer. The first thing that came to my mind was not a loss, but a win. A big 1-point guy comes up to my table, says his family, wife, Kids are at the bowling alley. Okay, whatever. Buys in for $200, that's nothing, but whatever. It's only him and me on the table, blackjack, and he proceeds to have one of the most amazing blackjack shoes I've personally ever dealt. By the end of the shoe he's turned his measly $200 into about $10,000. If memory serves me right, he only lost like 3 hands the whole shoe. Granted, this was only a $200 maximum table, very low. Guy is losing his shit about how great he's doing. During the whole time he's drinking like crazy. Our cocktail waitress don't come around that much, but when you tip them $15 on a $4 beer they'll be around a lot. By the 1/2 mark of the third shoe he's pretty hammered. Mind you, ideal kind of fast. An entire shoe in less than 10 minutes. At this point he is falling out of his chair and screaming at me, "If I win this hand I'll shit pants." I'm saying I hope you win, but please don't shit your pants. I don't want to have to go on break and make fun of you. Up until this point we had been getting along great. We are giving each other a hard time and whatnot, the way I like it. The most fun I have at a table is when I can be a semi-dick and the table enjoys it. He loses his shit and starts yelling at me that I'm scum and calls me a cunt. At this point I turn to my pit boss, slightly nod, and give him a look. They know what it means. In a few minutes the security guards are here escorting him off his feet, and to the door. TLDR, guy wins a lot and can't handle his alcohol. Not an employee, sorry in advance, but I used to have a friend who took advantage of me financially. Over the course of 3 years she managed to borrow about $4,000, which I never saw again, but she was such a sweet talker that I was always convinced. Really, I was just stupid. Point anyway. Surprise surprise, she was a compulsive gambler 2 times out of 3. When she wanted to hang out, it was at the casino. But I went along cause, well, I was getting a little hooked myself. One day we were in there, sitting together at a slot machine taking turns. We weren't a couple. She was 50 something, and I was 30, and somehow we hit $600. Which I know is small hat, but to us, that was 2 weeks pay. I immediately suggested we take it and run, and was astounded that she actually agreed for a change point. Well, as the machine was spitting out tokens, it ran out about halfway through, so we had to wait for an attendant. We had about half of the tokens, $300, sitting in a cup, and she asked if she could go off and play with it while I waited for the attendant. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? 5 minutes later, the attendant arrives, and I get the other $300. Another 5 minutes after that, she shows up empty-handed, asking if I'll split my half point in the closest thing I've probably ever had to an argument in my life. I told her I was going home, and she had to come with me, because I was her ride. She didn't have her own car. But she wouldn't leave. She kept begging me for just one more $20, and insisting she could make it back. Like she was convinced beyond all shadow of a doubt that she could. And I just said no, you can't. She even tried getting up really close to my ear while we were sitting down and trying to talk all sexually to me. It took almost every ounce of resolve I had not to react. Point anyway, sorry about the long post. I drove home without her, cause I had to go to work that night. The next morning, when I got off, she was still there at the casino. I was so certain there were going to be 10 voicemails from her begging for me to come pick her up, but she ended up getting her sister to come get her. I did give her the $20 just to shut her up before I had left the day before, but I doubt it lasted her all of the 16+ hours that she was there. Did 5 years at a casino in Queensland. One patron comes to mind. Old Austrian guy who used to play regularly, 5+ times a week. Dude had been playing for about 3 hours on a dollar machine, $1 per line, 25 lines, $25 a spin. Dude was about $6,000 deep in the machine by this point. He got up to go get a beer or something, and while he was gone a young fella sat down and put a $20 in, pulled up the feature, and clocked a major jackpot. On this machine he was looking at a $235,000 win from a $20. Austrian dude comes back as the feature comes up and loses it. Starts screaming about how that's his machine. It owes him $6,000. Shit like that. Carrying on like a toddler who's had his toy taken away. Security gets called. He continues his tantrum. They explained to him that due to the sheer amount of machines available inside the property, that he has no claim to the money, and while he was playing it earlier, our machines have no reserve function, so if he walks away from the machine then he is no longer playing. He throws a bigger hissy fit and demands that the general manager come and talk to him. Security double down and tell him to calm the fuck down or to get the fuck out. He tells the security guard to fuck off and pushes him. Promptly gets restrained by 3 guards and gets walked off the property and a 24-hour ban. To boot, point, dude was back precisely 24 hours later and continued playing like nothing had happened. I work in a keno department. I've worked in the pit for a few years and most of the food and beverage jobs too. We had a lady come in that had a foolproof method. She would bet $1 on one number. If she lost, she'd bet $2, then $4, then $8, then $16, then $32, and so on until her number came in, and then she'd start over with another $1 bid on a new number. It got so bad, and our machines were really due for an upgrade at the time, that she was up to $12,000 on one number. But our machines wouldn't accept the bet, and we had to give her 2 separate $6,000 tickets. After a few hours I accidentally heard her talking with another customer. She said she'd spent all of her money and had drained the joint account she shared with her husband. She started crying and said she was going to have to call him and she didn't want to. But now she was broke, from out of state, and she didn't have the foresight to book a hotel room first. She needed him to fly here so she could get more money. I just shook my head and started the next game. If you're just looking to throw away your money, we'll gladly just take it from you and put it in the tip jar. It'd be less painful for everyone. This didn't even happen in a casino, but it is a story about someone reacting to gambling losses. I saw this story on 2plus2, an online poker forum, many years ago, and I've never forgotten it, so I'll post it here in case anyone else might enjoy it. So I'm a young student and play professionally. I don't want to say which game or S/N, because it's all HS and this is too ridiculous to out myself. Last year I started playing 1C2CNL on Stars and I have since won approximately $160,000 playing poker 40-60 hours a week, various games. I normally don't have too big a tilt problem. Usually what I do is I keep it bottled up inside until I have a huge outburst. Approximately once every 3 or 4 months. I have broken countless monitors, laptops etc. Never before have I actually hurt myself, though at least not this seriously. Yesterday I can say without a doubt I lost my mind. In the midst of a $14,000 downswing, also a 2-month B/E on top of it, I started going berserk yesterday. I threw my mouse denting the wall and punched my laptop as hard as I could. Did not break. Usually I feel better after this sort of childish tantrum antics, but this time a deep rage was built in me that I had never felt before. I grabbed a 2.5-inch serrated folding knife off my desk, looked at it long and hard, and jammed it deep into my left ankle. Never before did I think I was capable of doing something as masochistic as this, and my first thought as I saw it go in almost to the hilt was this should be good for anyone who has never been stabbed before. If you don't hit a bone or tendon, there is practically no pain at all. If I didn't look down at what I did, or at the literal fountain of blood coming out of left ankle, actually sprayed onto several walls in my house, I probably wouldn't have even known. Completely painless for at least the first 3 hours. Now I can barely sleep because of pain though. By the end of the ordeal, my house looked like a murder scene. Pics forthcoming. Probably at least 3 dozen solid bloody footprints on my carpet as I walked up and down the stairs. The blood was squirting all over the walls as I got my phone and called my roommate telling him to come drive me to the hospital. In retrospect, I'm such a Jew bastard that I probably wouldn't have called an ambo and would have tried to drive myself while I was bleeding out. The hospital is a good 15 minutes away and I was feeling very faint by the end of it, so if I would have driven myself I could have easily lost enough consciousness and gotten into an accident or some sort of other situation. So I tell my roommate that he might have saved my life, and realistically he very well may have yesterday. What are friends for, am I right? So I get to the hospital, and for some reason, even though my leg is literally gushing blood, almost completely filling up a plastic Quiznos bag, I'm in a great mood. I make jokes with the staff and even compliment the doctor on his Cartier watch. Poor bastard didn't even know how tight it was, says he didn't know if it was nice and that his wife bought it for him. What a tool. It was very interesting to me how in such a situation you stay very focused and normal, at least until after all the adrenaline wears off point. So I make up a lie about what happened because I feel that my insurance won't cover me stabbing my own faking leg on purpose. I tell them that I had a wooden board in my lap and was trying to cut it in half. I tell them that I drove the knife in full force into the board and it went through into my ankle. I sensed that they interpreted this as this kid doesn't want to tell us he tried to off himself. For what it's worth, I had no intention at all of killing myself, but I can see how the situation might be construed as such. Hence the lie. I was told that I missed muscles and tendons. I ran really good not hitting my Achilles tendon, but that I had ruptured a major artery in my left ankle, and that it would have to be sutured. All in all, the emergency room visit was pretty chill. Outpatient maybe 1.5 or 2 hours. Nurse was a hottie as well. Really the most insane part about the whole experience was the sheer volume of blood that gushed everywhere I went. My next door neighbor, while holding her 2-year-old daughter, saw me walk out of my house with leg and a blood-filled sandwich bag splattering, blood all over our walkway and hand railing. Real good fellas, I'm sure that vision will fuck her up permanently somehow at such a young age. Poker table. Texas Hold'em. An old man ended up getting thrown out over $3. Two old guys checked down a hand to the end. There was a whopping $3 in the pot. Old guy #1 says he missed and shows an ace. Guy #2 says that's enough to win. Guy #1 then doesn't show his other card and tosses them away, but guy #2 still had his cards. Dealer correctly declares the hand dead because he didn't show both cards and says by rule he has to give the pot to guy #2. Guy #1 loses his mind and starts screaming and yelling. Eventually the floor supervisor is called over and backs up the play. Guy #2 actually gives the $3 to guy #1 since he wasn't trying to trick him or angle shot. Guy #1 takes the 3 $1 chips, spins around and throws them as far as he could. The supervisor told him he had to pick them up immediately or they would escort him off the property and give him a ban. So this 80-plus-year-old man has to crawl around on his hands and feet and eventually find all 3 chips. He then gets up, gives the dealer enough lip that he calls the floor back over and they kick the man out. Not an employee, but I'm an avid gambler. About 15 years ago, a group of 5 or 6 of us decided to take a trip to a casino a little over an hour away. Instead of playing in the pit like I normally do, I decided to stay around them and just play the games they chose. We floated back and forth between blackjack, 3-card poker, which I hate more than I love my mother, and a few other games. Upon arriving, getting our first drinks, and plopping at the 3-card poker table, I noticed a guy playing Caribbean stud at a table right next to us. He stuck out because he was by himself. Normal looking guy. I figured he was in his mid-50s, dressed in slacks, buttoned up, and no tie. I didn't think much of it. I assumed he was just blowing off steam after work or something. Fast forward 10 to 12 hours or so. We have moved around a fair bit, had several drinks, went to eat, napped in our room, and came back down to play some more. We sat down at the same 3-card poker table, and this guy is still at the stud table all alone. He must have had a really bad day at work. Then it happened. I hear a grown man screaming. Not the mad, angry screaming, but my dog just died screaming. I snap my head around to see the same guy push over his chair, scream some gibberish, flop to the ground, and begin to flail around on the floor like a 2-year-old that just got told no. After a few awkward minutes of his sobbing tantrum, several security guards dragged him away out of sight. The stud table closed immediately, and everything turned back to normal with all of us not having a clue as to what happened. Well, 30 minutes or so later, that same stud dealer got rotated to our table to relief deal. I wasted 0 seconds and asked what happened. At that point, I heard the saddest poker story of my life. Without explaining everything about Caribbean stud, it's a jackpot game. It's got a huge flashing sign with the current jackpot that continuously raises. In order to play and have a chance at the jackpot, you must ante the $5 and put $1 in the slot for the jackpot. If you don't put that $1 in the slot, you can only win up to double your ante. It has terrible odds. One of the worst odds of winning in a casino. Well, Jim Bob, as we'll call him, had been there around 15 hours and had slowly gambled nearly all the X amount of money he brought with him. The dealer wasn't sure about the amount. He guessed at least $5K. Well, when Jim Bob went to play his last hand, he only had $5. He only had the money for the ante and didn't put the $1 in for the jackpot. Before the hand was dealt, the dealer said the guy even mentioned something to the effect of, "I've lost everything else I brought today. I'll be damned if I go get a $1 chip just for the jackpot, and I'm not leaving here with this $5. He got dealt a faking royal flush. Because he didn't enter the $1 chip, he wasn't eligible to win the jackpot. What was the jackpot, you asked? $1.333 million. As a poker player, this ripped me. If I was in his situation, I would have done the same thing every time. I'm not quitting when I've lost everything but $5, and I'm damn sure I'm not going to ask someone for $1. Also my tantrum, in his situation, would have very similar. Former table dealer, I've seen a lot, nothing too horrible, because the casino I worked at was in a small town in the Midwest. Two people I remember most were both regulars. One was an older guy who was a real grouch, but would never give up, no matter how much he lost. What I remember most about him is that every time he lost a hand, he'd blow smoke in my face. He never once smiled at me, and always called me a beach under his breath. I would call him out for it, but he'd still do it again the next day. Another was a player who is maybe a couple years older than me. He was such a regular, and we had so much in common, that I actually became friends outside of my job. Small town Midwest problems, but he had a seriously horrible gambling addiction. He gambled so much, and he was terrible at BJ. He never came up, even, and was always down. He'd go every single night. When I quit my job he stopped going, and I was thankful. I hated seeing the spiral, the defeated look, when you think just one more hand, and I'll win my money back, but it never happens. Over a decade as a dealer and floor supervisor, pit boss, all on night shift, and there are too many stories to count. I've seen fist fights between two players over losses. One spilled onto our craps table. My favorite high limit craps player would punch the table, spike chips on the table when he lost, and motherfuck other players at the table. He always liked me because I was the best dealer and could handle his large bets without issue. He would request me from whatever other game I might be dealing, and I would be reassigned. I knew no matter how much he would be up, that he would always give it back plus some. He was a great tipper, and I enjoyed talking sports with him. I always knew he would end the night pissed off though. A few people shot themselves in their cars or jumped to the parking garage. A doctor was scamming the government for money to support his big gambling problem. He got busted, and most people were glad, since he was an asshole to most dealers. I've seen people just red-faced scream at their so when they are losing. I saw a guy punch a slot machine and cut his hand up bad when the glass broke. Had a guy straight faint while standing up at my table when I took all his money, collapsed into a ball. He was up thousands when I got there. 6 hours later he was down thousands. Super cocky when winning, then he was a panicky mess as he was losing and kept getting cash advances on his credit card. One guy cried as he was losing, would say how his wife was going to leave him and he didn't know what to do. Then he would keep coming back to the tables with money. He was an entitled white guy, maybe 35, rude as fuck and demanding. Another guy just puked on the floor after he lost a big double down that was all in. He had 20 and I drew out a 6-card 21. The other player on the game just looked at him after he puked, then we looked at each other like what the fuck. He said sorry and walked away. So much crazy shit happened there. This is just a taste. My parents and aunts and uncles were all in the casino business 40 plus years. They got me a job dealing poker in Vegas for a while, and I never saw somebody flip out. I had a guy try and tip me chips he grabbed out of some beach's axe wound right in front of me, but not much anger. My dad however had a story about a guy that always stuck with me. My dad has dealt baccarat in the high roller room at a major strip casino for nearly 30 years, and he once had a guy in regularly from South America who was a denim importer or something like that. Obscenely rich. 1 week the guy comes in and he's just chunking away tens of thousands at a time. He's down $1 million probably. He's getting upset, not like belligerent and rage, but frustrated. My dad had been dealing to him for a while, so he asked him, "Why do you do this if you aren't enjoying yourself?" This isn't really a super normal thing to ask. Most baccarat players are super rude Chinese dudes, but he asked anyway. Dude's response is pretty crazy to me. He said, "This is the only thing in my life I don't know the outcome of before it begins. I'd love him to just lose $1 million to me or my pop and change our lives, but is what it is. Sticks with me though. Seems like that quote could only be said by someone who is bored with life, since he could do anything." Not an employee, but one of my first trips to a casino I was playing a video poker machine with a jackpot like mini game that would hit sometimes where you could end up winning a bunch. Some guy hit a royal flush on the mini game and ended up winning like $8k or something on the $0.25 machine. I was pretty happy for him. It was exciting to see it. Then as he was waiting for an attendant to come pay out, he started telling me and my friend how it was the third or fourth jackpot he hit that month. We were like, whoa, this dude is rich and lucky as hell now. Then he followed it up by saying how he was just getting ready to give up and went to his car and found some change in his car seats that he came back in and won with. At the moment it dawned on me that this guy wasn't lucky or rich at all. He was a degenerate gambler constantly broke chasing the next jackpot. I felt bad for him. Losing over and over, and your go-to move is to search car seats for quarters to keep going in a never-ending cycle. I was working as a cocktail waitress in a seedy casino at the time. So, as I'm serving drinks, I notice a guy just punching the crap out of his machine. Now, I'm only 5'2" and probably only weighed about 115 pounds, so there was no way in hell I was going to approach him. That's fine. Security had been called, and they eventually tell the guy to knock his sheet off. Things calmed down, and the guy seemed to have chilled out. So about a half an hour later, as I'm doing a round, I notice him hovering around with his back against the machine. But, whatever, I think nothing of it. Next thing I know, there are customers freaking out, and the area was total chaos. Turns out the guy had his back against the slot machine because he was taking a giant sheet, literally, inside the coin tray. The guy was nowhere to be seen, and we had to call a biohazard team to clean up the mess. I was in the casino industry for a long time, and I can honestly say that was probably on the list of the top 5 most filthy things I'd ever seen. Was a poker dealer for a casino for a while, not the 4-card poker stuff. Texas Hold'em against other players, a raked game. Limit was 5/10 and the games were reasonably large. A well-known whale shows up and dumps £20k on the table for the maximum buy-in point over the period of maybe 3 to 4 hours he runs it up, absolutely crushing the game, and has a stack of maybe £60-70k in front of him. A hand comes around when he has already invested about £1k pre-flop. Raised to 50, re-raised to 300, re-raised to 1000, call. I don't remember the room out, but I remember he had a full house which he got on the river. The other player raised his bet, he raises all in, and the other player snap calls and rolls over 4 of a kind, rinses our guy for like £60k. He is just sitting there, as hen-faced, then a low guttural moan. Like the kind of moan you make when you suddenly and gradually realize that you're going to die. It increased in volume until he was bellowing it out. Then he just slumped in his chair, kind of slid of it, and then walked out, visibly shaking. Never seen that before. I have tons of stories about working at the casino, but this one is the worst loss I've heard about there. Other stories are about where people deem it inappropriate places to have sex or use the toilet and more. I cook in the buffet, so I didn't see this story firsthand, but the guys at the bar are tight with us in the kitchen, so we heard all about it. We do car giveaways every so often, and during the summer we always give away a sports car. That year it was a baby blue classic Corvette. This lady had come in determined to win that car for her husband. Now to get entries into the car giveaway you had to use your points from gambling on the machines. So this lady had been there all night playing for entries, and when the name was called it wasn't a name, and the other person claimed the prize point. This lady went to the bar and proceeded to get drunk and have a breakdown about how she spent $14,000 that night trying to win this car for her husband. Breakdown was complete with ugly cry and everything, and security had to get involved. Since she was making a scene point, it doesn't surprise me to hear it anymore, but it's still always shocking to hear how much people blow at the casino. The big spenders will always either put on a show about how much they spend, or just casually say how much they spend like it's nothing. I lost 60 grand here last year. Yeah, I know I probably come too much in the past year. I've spent 50,000 here. Both are lines I've heard, and I just thought, what the fuck. I've never worked for a casino, but have two local to me, and have been to Las Vegas twice. The second time I went was 2 weeks after that horrible shooting at Mandalay Bay. I had the trip booked 3 to 4 months in advance. The second Vegas trip I went solo, brought $1,200 with me, got drunk as hell with some random person before getting on the plane and more drunk with the people beside me on the plane. Point, this was a solo trip for 3 nights 4 days by the way. Won $200 the first night, won $500 the next day in the Golden Nugget on a Mega Bucks game. I'll never forget that game, because if you get 2 jackpot symbols a guy starts yelling, come on like he's trying to bust one out. Lol. Point, anyways, as fun as Vegas is, you can literally walk the casino floor, go to bed, and you'll still see the same people the next morning playing the same slots. I met up with people via a site called Vegas Message Board that we're cool, but they were betting $. I couldn't justify doing. Point, that said, back home my local casino, I prefer going on Monday Wednesday, as it's a slots only casino. I get this feeling that, since that machines get all loaded up with losing money, that they are gonna pay out more during the week. Funny enough, with this theory I went in after work one day and won $13,000 on 3 jackpots in 15 minutes. That right there is when my gambling problem started. Not that I lost it all, but I'd find myself getting paid and taking $200 to $300 each pay, not money for bills, and losing it. Point, I stopped for the most part. I go once in a while, but not too often. Our government finally allowed our lottery gaming corp to start an online site. Lost quite a bit on there, won $4,000 eventually, then self-banned myself for 3 months. Cured. In terms of the compulsive gambling, once in a while is still fine. Last time I was in a casino I sat down at a machine, elderly woman feeding 50s into a machine and losing over and over while the husband begged her to stop and leave. That right there was one of the saddest things I've seen. Point, also, casinos here do the following: no clocks, no sense of time, no mirrors, can't see the reality, no windows, can't see the outside world, pump fresh oxygen in, so it makes you feel awake. Constant promise. Like all of them, casinos can be an extremely dangerous place for anyone. You're better off never starting, to be honest. And if you do, always assume you're walking out with $0 left. Never take your bank cards in. I do, but I never take money out after losing. A lot of gambling addicts resort to suicide as the only way out, and it happens so much more often than we hear about. I'm really late here, but I have a story. I work as a security guard at a pretty uptight casino. We have a security guard posted at every entrance, so we see everyone come in and leave. On this particular day, an older patron came in and decided to blow a couple of hundred on the video blackjack machine, then a couple hundred more on slots. At some point during his visit, something in him snapped. He began to scream at the machines and hit them, causing security to politely ask him to stop or face an ejection. When he didn't, we had to ask him to leave. He surprisingly left quietly, at least until he got to the front door, where a security guard was posted. Point, at this point, he decided to berate the security guard at the front door, saying things like, "You stole my money," and "on all Trump rigs this casino, and every casino. All of my money went right into his pocket, didn't it?" Needless to say, he caused a pretty big scene and my supervisor decided to ban him from the property for 30 days. He was back the next day and attempted to spend more money on the video poker before he was ejected again. TLDR, An old man lost half a grand, blamed it on Donald Trump and got banned, only to return the next day and spend more money. Not an employee, but I have a very good friend who lives in Vegas. Anyway, I was visiting my friend and her husband and we went to the casinos. I prefer to do all my gambling in the stock market, but when in Rome, we meet up with another couple, who is my friend's best friend in Vegas. To make it TLDR, the wife, my friend's friend, and her husband are on the rocks because he is gambling too much, like he regularly loses his entire weekly paycheck. Anyway, we are having drinks planning our assault on the casino, but the gambler husband is already at the blackjack table. We show up, and he has a very large pile of chips. He and this other dude seem to be cleaning up. On the nth hand he goes all in with 20, only to lose to the dealer's 21. That's it. He loses it and takes the other dude's chips, who had folded, and throws them at the dealer and says this is my faking money, and he storms off, only to have security rain down on him and he gets a lifetime ban. This really has him riled up now, and he and the lady are having words, to put it mildly, at another casino, and he throws a drink at her, calls her a faking slut, not sure why he chose this epithet, and storms out. Yeah, that ended in divorce and reinforced for me why I hate casinos. Sure, if you are an alcoholic, a bar serving you could be construed as bad. However, the main goal of a bar is not to try to get everyone to drink as much as possible, and at most good bars people who seem drunk will be refused service and be asked to leave. However, at a casino every trick possible will be used to get customers to part with their money, including people with gambling addictions, and it can create negative spirals of financial ruin with little or no regulation of the casinos in this regard. In the 15 plus years of working in the industry, I've seen plenty of tantrums, been yelled and screamed at more times than I can count, even had people take swings at me, but never had to deal with a suicide over a loss. There were, however, 2 murders at one casino I worked at that had nothing to do with gambling. Just horrible people doing horrible things. The first was a guy from California that was staying in the hotel. He called the front desk to have some towels sent up and somehow got the woman who delivered the towels into his room, killed and dismembered her, loaded up the body parts in his luggage and left. They later found her torso in a nearby fishing pond, and her feet and hands in his car. When the police caught up to him in California, the next one was maybe a year later. One of our regular customers left, and a guy followed her out. He came back in, and went to the bar about an hour later. Her body was found in the desert the next day. He was still in the casino after the police had combed through the surveillance tapes and they arrested him on the spot. Totally not casino related, but I think this belongs here. I was at a large Magic the Gathering tournament for a format called Legacy. In Legacy you can use basically any card that has ever printed. Legacy decks are typically very powerful, some are capable of winning the game on the first turn. Card prices in Legacy are also quite high. You could spend 2 to 3 grand on a deck no problem. I was watching a friend play his final round of the day vs a very exasperated opponent. My friend won the set. His opponent shook his hand, dropped his cards onto his playmat, and stood up. He picked up his mat without putting any of his cards away, and carried them all over to a nearby card vendor. He sat down with the mat, sold his entire deck for cash on the spot, and walked out of the venue. He probably only got like 50% of his deck's actual value by selling it like that. It was probably a $1,000 rage quit. There was a regular guy coming to play roulette like 3 times per week, and we all knew he wasn't rich or anything. He's the owner of a local fast food place, and would often run out from the casino after losing, get the money from his cash register and gamble with that. On one evening he was playing for good for 5 hours. He was bad, swearing at all and everyone, threatening to poison our burgers when we next ordered in. He was down for CCA 2,000 euros, and he still had some cash on hand. He lost 100 euros in one spin and flipped out. To be fair, he played stupid with 25 euro chips. The guy went ballistic, spilled his drink, and the other guys sitting next to him on the play table, screaming that the game was rigged, that we are stealing from him and all that. Then he pulled out 600 euro cash from his pocket and started tearing them and throwing them on the table, saying, "You did this. Look what you made me do." He looked like he was gonna jump across the table and start punching the dealer. He had to be escorted by security. Caesar's Palace 2004. I had a guy at the table. He was drinking heavy, really funny Filipino guy. He has some chips and a stack of 100 bills. He gets involved in a hand before I got a chance to chip him up. But those 100s, if they are on the table, they are in play. He called a roll in which he thought he was just calling the chips. He's a head ack vs A2. He has the outkicked. I do my best to explain that the Allen is not for just the chips, but the cash as well. He's fine with it. Till the river the op spikes a deuce and steals the hand. The guy lost 8,700 in one hand. He has a large massive comical reaction. He got up and basically ran away like the kid from Home Alone with his hands on his face screaming. He comes back, talks shit to the A2 player and acts like he's gonna tip me and sticks a bird in my face and says you looks like Salamandler. Whole table erupts in laughter. Not really, but PPL laughed. I got moved to 122 towards the end of my shift there. He is drunk as a skunk. I sat down to start dealing and he apologized for earlier but still called me Salamandler the rest of the night. I don't work at a casino, but I work at a horse track. It's the only gambling allowed here. Suicide. First time someone was found with their head blown off under a tree in the barn lot. Another guy hung himself. Another guy shot himself. Not as spectacle as the first one. One guy threatened to blow up the racetrack and that he personally knew Mayfair members and George W. Bush, so we knew people to make this happen. One guy shat on the floor after he won $200k and threw a ton of cash at it. Edit. Seems a little different than casinos. Seems like people will react after a small loss at a table. You don't see that here. You see it when they lose millions at once. People get really pissed off at us, security, when they lose a ticket and someone else's takes it and cash it. What the fuck do you want us to do? Law states you abandoned property at that point. But unfortunately, our company wants to go by their Indian law and make us due diligence to return the ticket with cameras from 2003. Those are the guys that piss on sheet, throw fits, etc. Keep you faking vouchers in your pocket and this shit wouldn't happen. Not a casino, but at a golf course, not high end, pretty much middle income folks. One night I was working late and the boys would play dice at the bar. $100 a roll was pretty standard and most times somebody left with $1,000, but usually everything came out pretty even. One night I watched a guy who was a pretty well-known problem gambler go on a bad run. Blew through the $2k he brought and went on credit with one of the guys he was playing with. Before I knew it, he was almost $12k down. Ran to his car and got his title and signed it over as the guy he was into the cash for refused to let him go further. Ended up almost $30k down before they finally told him to stop. I found him the next morning when I opened sleeping on the back steps of the club. He just got up and started walking home and I didn't see him come around anymore. I heard later that he had started a payment plan, but I can't imagine that he ever paid it off. I'm an addict. I didn't used to be. In my earlier days I could go to Vegas with friends, spend $100 and say F it and just have fun. Then in 2010 I had a nervous breakdown that changed things for me. My anxiety and depression levels soared and I've had several episodes since that big one. Soon after that 2010 breakdown, I discovered that the casino, slots, was a great mental escape. So, I kept going back. If I won, even better. But it seemed to be about being there, hearing the noises, being able to zone out and not have to deal with anything. I wanted to win, just because it meant I could be there longer and oh yeah, pay off some bills. I think most of us addicts know, even when we win we lose. I tried to quit so many times, but my anxiety would ramp up to intolerable levels and soon I was right back there just to feel okay for a bit. It's been 5 months since I gambled. The difference is that, since my last episode, new, comprehensive mental health support has been put in place in my community. Being able to get a grip on that has meant the world to me and done so much. I go to weekly therapy and the mental health team work in tandem with my GP. It's everything to me. I have major debts and am in danger of bankruptcy, but I'm hoping I can make all the payments because I know I'd feel good being able to make restitution. I feel so bad about what I've done to myself that there are days where I can't stand it. But I also get angry at the casinos when I see them advertise I'm their perfect target and they know I'm at their point. The last day I gambled I went to the security team and asked to be self-excluded. It was the scariest, hardest thing I've ever done, and honestly they couldn't have been nicer or more supportive of what I was doing. They were so nice to me. I've excluded for 3 years, the maximum, and intend to keep re-upping for exclusion. I'm hopeful I'll never gamble again. TLDR. Mental health trouble meant the casino felt like the only place where I felt okay, even though it was really the worst possible thing I could have done. I was astounded watching the high limit roulette at Aria. I mean, I'll play a $100 minimum table every now and then, and when I walked in they had one set at $500 and the other at $1,000. Welp, there goes my try. But I smoked a cigar and watched as the foreigner, Tanskin, all Armani, maybe Lebanese, took a small Armani bag that was full of cash. He would slip out a 50k brick and lay it on the table he was rolling 10k a spin on and small assortment of numbers. There were a couple spots I could tell he would bundle up on, mainly hoping for 2 or 3 numbers to hit and make a real payday. He burned through the first 50k in about 8 spins, took another 50k out. He made a few small hits and was digging himself out of the hole, and on his 4th or 5th spin, he hit his magical number. I think he was ganging up on the 8, about 3 1k chips on it, and 500 chips, splitting it every way. They counted it out, and when he colored up he had 7 cranberries at Aria. Those are 25k each, 175k. He stuffed them in his pocket and walked out. I just sat and daydreamed about what that kind of money must be like. Some people really believe in this magic or superstition of luck or lady luck with gambling. Not chance, not probabilities, not knowing maths and respecting caution. Pure emotion, ego, entitlement, weird mental illness, emo. I understand excessive drinking. I can understand the brain chemical of cocaine and heroin, how that initially feels good then you're quickly hooked, and lying to yourself about having it under control. Gambling addiction is comprehensible on those terms, I guess, but I just don't get it. I hit a casino in Nassau and lost $10 in an hour. Stopped. Years later, I went to Vegas, ate food, saw Cirque, flew around Grand Canyon and tour. That excursion was minor ripoff due to 1 or 2 planes being out of commission due to hot weather. What the fuck? Amount lost gambling, 0. I met one man who bet horses patiently and methodically for consistent win or break even. He won enough in Vegas to pay for him and his girlfriend vacation. How? He bet against his cousin or nephew, boxer Tommy Hearns. Honestly, it's the people who come in every day and just can't be anything but miserable about it. It's not that they have a huge freak out or even can't afford to lose money. It's that even if they are currently up 20k and a dealer outdraws their hand, they are right back to incessant bitching about how awful it is. It doesn't matter if they win or lose, and these people are generally the worst about not leaving till they've lost it all. They'll be right back tomorrow to do it all over again with the same joyless attitude. It makes you wonder if they have any happiness in their lives at all, especially since this is obviously their main pastime that's supposed to be fun. That being said, unlike what a lot of people in here who have quit the industry have said, I don't find my work to be a soul-crushingly depressing affair. The happy people playing cards definitely outnumber the miserable ones. Also, if you're a social person, table games usually attracts other outgoing people because the games are social by nature. I've met an untold amount of wonderful and interesting people in my time working at a casino. Not an employee, but I've seen a few losses over the years. About a decade ago I was living in a different state than I do now, and there was an Indian casino about 20 minutes away. I was single at the time and had every other Friday off from work. So I'd go on occasion with $100. No credit cards, no debit cards, just the cash with me. When it was gone, or I hit a certain number, so was I. So anyway, I'd go and play $5 a hand blackjack, smoke a few smokes and just people watch. I sit down at the table and play, up a bit, down a bit, typical day in the way, to have some entertainment value. The fellow next to me, however, different story. Dude is playing between $50 and $100 a hand. Dude goes on a losing streak due to some bad luck. Things like doubling down on a hard 11 getting a 14 and then watching the dealer somehow turn a 6 into a 20. Anyway, dude leaves and I see him go to the ATM. It was within eyeball distance and he comes back. Starts wagering more aggressive. Now we're talking $100 a hand, and because there was an extra seat open he's playing 2 hands at once. Dude goes on another bad run. It was at this moment I learned that ATMs have a maximum you can take out from a given place at a given time. Dude loses it. He's screaming and yelling. I'll assume he lost the rent money or something because he was livid. I work at a casino and also play cards there. I always liked playing cards as long as I can remember. But this one guy I was playing poker with one night was drunk, saying he was going to drop $1,000 as his last hurrah before he had his kid that was on its way. He kept asking me if I was his guardian angel, which I appreciated the compliment, but I told him I was just there to play cards. He told me his life story about how he came from the ghetto, being shot and stabbed at, and beat from not only his family, but from his environment, that he lived in South Central LA in the 90s. We connected on how my grandpa wanted me to be a lawyer, and how he tried to pay his way through a law school when he was younger, but gave up because it got too stressful. He complimented me more than once on how well I played cards and being his guardian angel. But I didn't want to tell him I was neither of those things and got up from the table and wished him luck with his new life and kid because I was going to burst into tears right there, hoping that he wasn't going to end up like all those poor people who off themselves right before their life is about to change, since I've gone through that before. I like playing cards because I like the absolute nature of numbers, odds, and statistics, but when I see others trying to change their luck at the table, it makes me wonder. I also grew up Christian and remember all the stories of Jonah and Sodom and Gomorrah and how the problems are still the same to this day. People are lost and need something in their life to give them purpose, otherwise they are going to be lost forever. I've dealt poker for about 12 years, and there is only one king of the overreaction in my book. Let me introduce you folks to Guy. Let me start with a disclaimer. Away from the table, Guy is a sweetheart, but changes into something else once he sits at the felt. Guy is rapidly approaching 80 now, yet looks like he's in his early 60s, thanks to a terrible toupee. He's also tall, very much overweight, and acts a lot like a boxer who's taken one too many punches, which makes sense, because he was a champion for boxing in the Navy. My card room is on the smaller side by most standards, only 4 tables, which happens to actually be the most in the state, so we try to take care of our players as much as possible by providing lunch and dinner. Guy will show up when we open in the morning with a large breakfast from one of the various local eateries, grab a couple of the donuts we provide, and spent the next 45 minutes to an hour trying to both eat and play cards, but really only doing one well. Guy plays nearly every hand, it's a small limit game, and plays them all the same way, poorly. If he has, let's say, a 10-2-3 suited, he will call all bets and most raises if he flops 3 to a straight or flush. Heaven help us, if he flops a pair, he will bet it like he's flopped the nuts and act like he's taken the worst beat of his life when a hand never behind his wins the pot. However, when he actually does flop the nuts, he refuses to bet his hand, instead hoping to check raise the unwary tourist, as the regular are all very much aware of his playing style. Wait, did lunch just arrive? There goes Guy to load himself up with the first of 3 heaping plates that he inevitably will eat all of. Jack 7 of suit in the small blind. It's almost connected. Better call 2 raises. Holy cow, Edge 7 flop. Must be the nuts. Check raising with a 3 bet the 2 betters in positions. Seems like the right play. Gotta make sure the next 2 streets are capped as well even as it comes running 4s. Not sure how second and third pair could ever lose with that board. And, they both flopped a set point. This is where Guy sets himself apart. If he doesn't feel like it was too bad of a beat, to him, a bad beat is any time he loses. He might just say a few words in some gobbledygook language he makes up as he goes. If it's a little bit of a beat he might just berate the dealer for not hitting his runner draw and demand to be dealt out the rest of their down. He misses 2 hands before he changes his mind. Now if it's a true mini beat, say top pair loses to a flush or straight draw, guy will hold his cards in the dealer's face, much like you might hold a half-eaten sock in a dog's face, throw them down, berate the player and the dealer, get up from the table to take a walk, which normally ends up with him returning with another serving of food. Regulars know how short his temper is and relish setting him off. I have heard he's mellowed out a lot compared to 30 years ago, when he would smash his head bloody in the bathroom after losing, and regularly rip paper towel dispensers from the wall.